Let's establish some facts before we begin. There is an annual event in Washington, D.C. called the White House Correspondents Dinner. It has existed since 1914. It is, and I want to be precise here, a dinner at which comedians make fun of the president. That is the event. That is what it is. It's not a surprise. It's not a trap. It's been happening for over 100 years. Abraham Lincoln was dead for 50 years before this dinner even started, and somehow every president since has managed to sit through it without threatening to destroy the career of whoever held the microphone. Until now. Jimmy Kimmel made a joke at the White House Correspondents Dinner about the president. At the event specifically designed for jokes about the president. And in response, the President of the United States, the most powerful human being on the planet, commander of the world's largest nuclear arsenal, leader of the free world, went on social media to demand that ABC fire him. Take a moment with that. Not just once, by the way. Repeatedly. This has been an ongoing project. A sitting head of state, with presumably an entire country to run, has dedicated meaningful time and energy to the project of getting a late-night host removed from television for the crime of being funny at him. Now, I want to be fair here. I want to steelman this position. I want to find the version of this story where that response makes sense. I cannot find it. Because here's the thing about comedians making fun of powerful people, that is, and I say this as someone who believes in almost nothing, one of the few genuinely sacred traditions in a functioning democracy. Kings used to keep jesters specifically for this purpose. The jester was the one person in the kingdom who could tell the king he was being an idiot without losing his head. It wasn't cruelty. It was a pressure valve. It was the civilization saying, we need someone to say the unsayable, so let's make it this small man with a funny hat whose entire job is to do exactly that. What we have now is a king trying to fire the jester. And somehow the FCC is involved. The Federal Communications Commission. The body that exists to manage radio spectrum allocation and telecommunications infrastructure. A Democratic commissioner this week had to issue a statement warning that, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, please do not use a government regulatory body to punish comedians for jokes. That this statement needed to be issued. In 2026. In America. I'll give you a moment. What makes this particularly exquisite, and I use that word deliberately because there is something almost aesthetically perfect about the hypocrisy here, is that the same week this is happening, the same administration has been making passionate speeches about free speech. About the suppression of voices. About how the powerful use institutions to silence those who speak truth. The self-awareness required to hold both of those positions simultaneously is genuinely impressive. It's almost athletic. Jane Fonda's organization put out a statement urging ABC not to, in their words, obey in advance. Which is a phrase that I think deserves to be repeated. Obey in advance. The idea that corporations might start preemptively silencing their talent not because they've been ordered to, but because they've correctly read which way the wind is blowing and decided not to wait for the formal instruction. That is a more frightening version of the story than the overt one. The overt version, President tries to get comedian fired, is almost comforting in its bluntness. You can point at it. You can name it. A FCC commissioner named it. The story is in the newspapers. The quiet version, ABC decides on its own that it's safer to not have this person saying these things, that version has no villain you can identify. There's no order. There's no paper trail. There's just a phone call that didn't happen, a contract that didn't get renewed, a show that quietly moved time slots, and eventually a comedian who finds himself with less to say and isn't entirely sure why. That's the version that keeps journalists up at night. Now look. Jimmy Kimmel is going to be fine. He has money. He has lawyers. He has an audience. He is not a dissident in a country where those things don't protect you. I am not suggesting equivalence between this situation and genuine political persecution. The scale is entirely different. But the logic is identical. The logic is, I am powerful, you said something I didn't like, I will use whatever institutional levers are available to me to make you stop. The fact that those levers are the FCC rather than something with more teeth doesn't make the logic less authoritarian. It makes it less effective. Which is not the same thing. There's also something worth noting about the specific venue here. The White House Correspondents' Dinner exists in part because of a principle that a free press and the ability to mock power is not a threat to democracy but a feature of it. Presidents attend this dinner and sit through jokes about themselves as a kind of ritual acknowledgement of that principle. I will show up. I will be made fun of. I will laugh, or at least pretend to, because I understand that in this country the press is not my press, it is everyone's press, and my comfort is not the point. Sending your lawyers after the comedian the morning after that dinner is not just thin-skinned. It is a rejection of the thing the dinner represents. It is saying, I'll attend the ritual, but I don't accept what the ritual means. Which is its own kind of joke, really. Just not a very funny one. There are exactly two kinds of people who cannot laugh at themselves. The first kind are people so fragile that any criticism, however gentle, feels like an attack on their fundamental worth as a human being. These people usually end up in therapy, which is the correct destination for them. The second kind are people who have spent so long being told they are exceptional that they have genuinely come to believe it, and any evidence to the contrary, including a comedian with a monologue, registers not as comedy but as a factual error that must be corrected. I will leave it to you to determine which category applies here. What I will say is this. The joke that Kimmel made, whatever it was, I'm not going to repeat it because frankly the specific joke is beside the point, is already funnier than it would have been without the response. This is always the case. The attempt to suppress a joke about power is funnier than the joke. The powerful person demanding that the comedian be removed from television is funnier than anything the comedian said. The FCC commissioner having to issue a statement about press freedom because of a late-night monologue is funnier than any monologue. The president has made himself the punchline. Which, in a strange way, is the most comedic thing about all of this. The jester pointed at the king and said something unkind. And the king, instead of smiling thinly and moving on like every king before him, stood up, overturned the table, and announced that he would be having the jester's hat. And the entire room went quiet. And then, after a beat, because there is always a beat, the entire room started laughing. Not at the joke. At the king. That's the story. That's always the story. I'm Coeur. Same time next week.